Can you start a podcast with me, please? I need something to do.
Pastrnak sent it out in front of Malkin to save. They score! Elias Lindholm looks to the heavens.
Here's a chance. Poitras right in, and goalie scores. Oh my, what a move by the rookie.
2-on-1. Pastrnak moving in with Marchand. Get it to it. Score!
The zone. Coyle dances in. Backhand score!
Lindholm right wing corner. Pastrnak is there. He scores! David Pastrnak wins it for Boston.
Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Bruins Tape to Tape. I'm your host this week, Caroline with a K, and I am joined by my fantastic co-host, Maria from Watertown. Hey, Maria.
Hello, hello. What's going on?
One more week closer. We're another week closer. It's almost hockey season.
I know there's pros and cons to both of that, which means summer's coming to an end, but a sport that we both enjoy watching and talking about will be ramping up again. And of course, we're heading into another Bruins season with loads of questions on our minds.
Indeed. Yes, we are continuing our little mini series that we started the week prior. And this week, we're going to be talking about forwards and what we need, what we have, and where that leaves us going into training camp. So you've done a little bit of research on exactly how Boston really fared in terms of their offensive production. Obviously, that is the primary goal of any forward that plays out on the ice, although we have said many a time that there is some degree of defensive responsibility, some more so than others, but it didn't seem like we did too terrible offensively once we got going.
No, overall, the Bruins ranked 10th in the league for offense last season, scoring a total of 268 goals, which is an average of about 3.2 goals per game. However, I just found myself last season constantly seeming like I was saying, why can't we score more? Why aren't we scoring more? But they did much better than they did in the prior season, where they were ranked 27th with only 222 goals. And that was just a miserable season in general.
Yeah, that was pretty horrible.
Yeah, it was pretty horrible. But we are all very well aware of the fact that with the system that the Bruins play, there is a defensive responsibility for every member of the roster. And that includes, for the most part, it includes our centers and forwards. I know that David Pastrnak gets a shit ton of criticism for his inability to sometimes protect the puck or turning it over. And you know what? When the guy is your top scorer and your top point getter, I'm going to say have a cup of you know what. Because without a guy like that,
I mean, he touches the puck more.
Right. And it's not his primary job. And oh, by the way, how many times did we see Pasta being double teamed, right? Where you've got two guys from the opposing team saying, if you think we're going to let you walk in and dance around in here, you're sorely mistaken. And some of that comes from the fact that we didn't have enough offensive depth and balance.
So we're going to talk a little bit, especially about what those jobs are. And when we say that's not really David Pasternak's job, he is probably, not just because of who he is and the role that he fills on this team, but he is probably about as far away from defensive responsibilities as any particular player could get, because he is on the first line, he is a winger, and he is the most elite player on the team.
He pretty much does everything, right? He's in every kind of offensive component, penalty kill, number one guy. I never want to see him on a penalty kill. That I will say. I never want to see him trying to kill off a penalty. So
people need to temper their expectations in terms of what they should be expecting from someone like him in his particular role when it comes to defense. But we certainly have a lot of questions, and we will talk about that when we get to the players. But I'll just give the quick rundown on what the heck are they supposed to be doing out there anyways, and how do you construct a forward team with the pieces that you have? What pieces are necessary and non-negotiable, and what pieces or elements do we have some flexibility in. The pros, when it comes to constructing your forward lines, you have a lot more flexibility compared to defense. You have a lot more players, and the way in which you construct those lines to accomplish their primary responsibilities can be different based on the skills that you have. So every line has a general job, and then how those jobs are accomplished are coming from very specific skills that different players have. Your first line oftentimes is your best line, but I want to say before we go further, much like your pairings where you do have defensively your first, second, and third pairings, and your first pairing is generally your best players. Just because you are on the first forward line versus the fourth forward line doesn't necessarily mean that they are good or bad. Again, they all have different jobs. Your first line, that's going to be your elite scoring, high offensive pressure. Think create, distribute, finish. That is the general expectation you will see across the board for any team. So different from defensive structure where we said how that gets comprised is going to very much so be dependent on the systems that the organization uses. When it comes to forwards, this is basically the playbook, and then it's how you accomplish that is where the systems and things come into play that makes them a little bit different. The first line is going to also be most likely your power play one. They're going to be scoring the most goals. They're going to have the most finishing threat. They will capitalize on the turnovers. They're going to exploit the matchups that they are up against. They're going to be key in that. However, complementary skills, always very important in any matchup you have, any combination you have. Your secondary scoring is going to be on the second line. That's the other piece. You want to have more than one line, more than one player who can score goals. However, you'll notice as we go down the lines, your defensive responsibilities begin to increase. So this is going to have more 200-foot players. They're going to be going back and forth a little bit more. Their jobs are to score, defend, and transition. Huge. They're always going to be matched up against the opposing top six players. They need to be able to wear down the opposing defensemen, again, because they are playing more of a 200-foot game. You don't want to have an identical attacking line like you might have in the first line. So if you've got three heavy forechecking, cycling guys in the first line, this one you're going to want to have be much more fleet of foot, lighter, more suave transitional game. You have to have diversity in your top two scoring lines in how they get the job done. You don't want to have two of the same because then it's too predictable. And your third line, more defensive, more two-way. They're going to be more focused on shutting down, preventing further movement of the opposing team's offensive lines. This is your grinder line, and they're going to be really good at the counterattack. You'll start to see more of these guys be on the penalty kill versus the top two lines being more so focused on the power play. They'll be more on that. This is also your most versatile line. So you're going to have your strong defensive players, but they're going to be really good with defensive zone faceoffs. They're going to grind down those strong opposing players. A lot of really good forechecking you want to see at this point. This is also a line that can often be considered your developmental line. So think about last season. Who was on the third line? Fraser Minten, Marat Husnadinov, right? Those guys. Because they are younger, they are getting exposure to the game. They're playing fewer minutes because the further down the line you go, the fewer shifts you're going to be taking. And so you'll often see this is where a lot of young guys, the up-and-comers, the future of the team, they start here. They may see 12 minutes a game, 14 minutes, and it's also really ideal to have your younger guys here because you may also then find that line has a singular veteran on it to kind of help with that. I
Mm-hmm.
think a couple years ago, Uncle Nick often hung out on this line, or Charlie Coyle, and he would have some of the younger guys because that's how they're going to learn. The fourth line, this is high energy, physicality, defensive reliability, forecheck. Do not get scored on is your primary goal. I thought last year Boston had also a very well-constructed fourth line because who was on that line?
Kastelik, Corrali, and Janot.
These are guys, they go out. These are your Bash brothers. Their job isn't to score. Their job is to foil and try and get the puck to move. And if they can score, awesome. But they're also only out there for about 8 to 10 minutes a game. So they have to be impactful when they are out there on the ice.
Although there are instances when we saw Mako utilize that trio as a let's set the tone. And that is also, to me, part of the role of that fourth line. If you think it's going to be an easy night at TD Garden or in your arena, watch this. Watch this.
Yes. How many times did we see last season that line in particular either explicitly get sent out there to get the crowd riled up, to get the team riled up,
or starting a game?
So that's a lot of what their job is as well, 100%. It's like almost the non-actual puck-moving side of the game that they have to provide that energy. That's from the line perspective. Now you have to think about what are the specific roles and jobs within each line that you absolutely need to have in order to accomplish the broader goal of that line. Core forward jobs. You have your creators and playmakers, right? These are the guys who create the chances. They distribute the puck. They see passing lanes. They get the pucks to those people who are the finishers and shooters. They convert on those chances. They are in the right place at the right time to receive the puck from that playmaker. Puck retriever. They're getting those loose pucks and they're getting possession back in maybe the offensive zone or the defensive zone. But you need somebody who can actually nab that puck and get it back into Boston's control. Forecheckers, who is going to pressure the defenders and force turnovers? Who's going to be aggressive enough to make them make a mistake? And that is a huge key piece to Marco Sturm's system. Force turnovers, create transition, make the other team make a mistake, and then capitalize on that. Thinking about this coming season, those are in particular, those jobs that I just mentioned, very important that we have a lot of guys who can do that on almost every line. And then you get into kind of more of the nitty gritty, the greasy kind of plays, right? The net front interior guys who can get in right in front of the net, who can get past that defense and be in that up close area so they can screen or they can do tip-ins or get those rebounds and just occupy the space that defenders do not want them in. You've got your defensive conscience sort of players where they're really covering defensively. You'll see a lot of forwards, centers. That's a huge part of their job. You really need to see a center be very responsible when it comes to defense because they're not just centering the wingers. They are centering the defensemen. So you need to make sure that he knows what he's doing in that regard. He's going to be supporting low in that defensive zone. Your matchups and shutdown players, you're going to see further down the line more of these guys, but they defend the opposing skilled players really well. Your face-off possession centers, if you've got centers, you really want to have them be face-off specialists. We're talking well over 50%. Patrice Bergeron was otherworldly, but you want to see 60% because having possession right off the face-off is half the battle when you're in the offensive zone or in the defensive zone for that matter. And then your physical presence guys. These used to be the enforcers, but these are the guys who are not afraid to throw their body weight around, either to interrupt play or to get the game going. A single player can check multiple boxes, and they should, because you shouldn't have only one guy doing one thing. You want to have a well-rounded group of guys out there at any given time so they can fill in the gaps. When you're considering the first line, creation, retrieval, finishing, the elite scoring line needs to be able to answer 3 questions. Who gets the puck? Who creates the chance? And who finishes? that is your typical formula, the retriever, playmaker, finisher. But it can also be a two-way retriever, transition scorer, creator, finisher, or a little bit more old-fashioned, but your power forward. So the power forward is the one who can score, but also can use his physicality to get around. Your dual threat creator. The requirement is that somebody is performing all of those jobs. Transition is good. Net front is good, but you really need to consider those three things. So how do you feel last year that went? Did we have somebody available who could do those things? Get the puck, create the chances, and finish the chances.
Well, we know who the finisher should be, right?
Yeah.
Always first and foremost. And that would be David Pastrnak. But based on how things played out last season, he turned into more. Now, maybe this was intentional on his part. I do not know, to become more of a playmaker.
Yeah.
But his 71 assists last season were ridiculous. He's still at 100 points. I guess in terms of, if you look at the statistics of where they finished in scoring overall and their average goals per game, I'd say you did what you needed to do. However, I would much rather have David Pastrnak being the finisher
Right.
than the playmaker. And I don't know if that was a component of a necessary evil, because of we have lacked scoring and offensive depth for what seems like an eternity now. We've talked about this ad nauseum, to the point where you had David Pastrnak basically saying at the end of the season that he might like to have a little bit more help.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. And
So
we'll talk about who is actually available for this coming year, but I think
it's hard to say it didn't work because you had a better season that we had anticipated, and you got into the playoffs.
Yes. Yes. But did we truly have a reliable combination of retriever, playmaker, and finisher? Well, one of our finishers had a pretty lengthy dry spell that was damaging.
Right. Room for improvement. But then we had a guy who it looked like he was on pace to score 60 goals, right? And we're referring to Morgan Geekie because even his line mate Pasta said that he thought he was going to get to 60 goals. Good intentions, but the execution is not what we had hoped. And I think some of that is due to the fact that you've got some guys here who are they're not performing up to what the expectation was when they were first signed.
Yes. So line 2, that's your creation, scoring, defensive support. So it's effectively also getting the goals, but with a different flavor and slightly more defensive responsibility. The better your players are at multiple jobs, the less rigid the line construction becomes. For the second line, you're looking for someone who can create offense, someone who can finish, and someone providing that defensive matchup support. Now, your traditional composition is the two-way center, your playmaker, and a finisher. But you can also see it with two-way center, two-way winger, scoring finisher, or playmaking center, defensive winger, power finisher. And you want to often see, if you can get away with it, guys who are really good with the forecheck job and that physically in that transition. Now, I think in terms of last season, this was one of the more well-constructed lines that could accomplish those primary objectives of the creation, the scoring, and the defensive support. And we got lucky because Pavel Zacha has good and bad years. He has always been a very good playmaking center. That has been his bread and butter, no matter if he was scoring goals or not scoring goals. I think this year he just got lucky with all the goal scoring on top of that. And I think he's gotten better as a two-way center. But they were just super lucky with having, I think Casey Middlestat is your playmaker, and they had an excellent finisher in Arvidsson. But when that became neutralized or stopped performing, that was it for scoring. That was it.
Didn't we say more than once last season that the combination of Zacha, Arvidsson, and I can't remember who was up on the other
Middlestat.
side, Middlestat, for a significant period of time, that was the line that was driving them.
Yes. Yes.
But Zacha had one of his best years as a Boston Bruin.
As a player, period.
As a player, right.
Yeah. This was probably the one line that I think that they did all right in, construction-wise. Line number 3, primary roles, defend, disrupt, transition, and provide enough offense to effectively punish your opponents. This is your most flexible line in terms of composition. The biggest need is having defensively responsible players who also have the ability to quickly retrieve pucks and forecheck. Someone who is capable of turning recovered possession into offense. Again, we talked about Marco Sturm's system and the transition, and that is going to be a huge part of their job. That could be a shutdown center with a forechecker and a scorer, a two-way center and a transition winger, or a physical forechecker, two-way center and a younger playmaker, like your guys coming up, or a very defensively responsible winger. And you do want to see, as your extras, if you can get this, guys who can win faceoffs and continue to provide some additional scoring. I think we really liked at least 2/3 of that third line last season were together pretty much the entire time. And that was Husnudinov and Minten. And then I think the third person was either Isamont or Steves on the right.
Because there was some interchanging parts there trying to solidify that spot, so to speak.
My biggest complaint, and it's not like it's a massive complaint about that particular line, was the fact that it was so young, that there was no consistent veteran there.
Right.
And I believe you said this around the time that we were in the playoffs. They just struggled.
They were deer in the headlights. Even when at one point I believe they had Hagens in the lineup, and you could see that they weren't quite ready for prime time yet.
Yeah, they did not have a steadying veteran presence. And that would be my only complaint about that particular line composition. And then your fourth line, that's your energy, pressure, defensive reliability. The biggest questions are, can you forecheck? Can you hustle and support? Can you defend as well? Or are you able to change the momentum of the game?
And let me just add, popping in a goal or two every now and then is the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae, right?
Exactly. But it's not your primary job. And that's
No,
okay.
it's not. It's not.
But their biggest is, can you avoid getting scored on? That physicality is going to be huge. Not necessarily a mandatory requirement. And you don't have to be a big boy to be physical. I think that Mark Kastelik is that kind of player where he doesn't seem like he is a big boy in the way that Tanner Jeannot, he's a big boy. But he plays with such a physicality game. Yeah. So you don't need 3 big hitters. You could have a physical forechecker, someone who's a defensive center, and then someone who's got some speed. They just have to have some of the best energy out there. And you're going to see some really good penalty killers coming off of this line because it's that physicality piece that you really want to see. Understanding these roles, we have the following available. Offensive elite drivers, that's David Pastrnak. Top 6 transition and scoring weapons, we have the potential in Peterka. Again, he's unproven in Boston, but he has shown that is what he can do. And then Morgan Geekie. Top 6 two-way supports, supposed to be Lindholm. I know how you feel. That's what his job is supposed to be. And then
I know what his job is supposed to be. How about he start doing it?
Middle 6 offensive creators, Middlestat, Hagens, potentially Patra, if he's being given his shot also. And don't forget about Lucas Reichel. Two-way workhorses, you've got Minten and Husnudinov. They're young kids, but boy, are they putting in the time, energy, effort, and work. Your scoring depth and forecheck, Steves fits that archetype. And then your energy, physical checking, of course, Jeannot, Corrali, Kastelik, Isamont. And then new kid on the block for potential two-way depth, Ivan. We've got a lot of creators and centers, and we've got a lot of options on our fourth line. But what we don't have, or at least I don't think, in terms of an obvious top six retrieval, we don't have someone there. We don't have secondary high-end creators. And we do not have really much in the way of secondary finishers. It's Morgan Geekie, but he was also on the same line as David Pastrnak.
Right.
So
you had to top load, right?
Right.
How many times have we seen this movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're top loading your first line.
Right.
In the hope that you're lightning in a bottle with some other lines and combinations. Now, Victor Arvidsson, he had a very good year with the Bruins last season.
He did.
And Zacha had a really, as you stated earlier, his best career year. Right? But you moved on, or Victor Arvidsson moved on from you. So outwalked 25 goals out the door at that point. Now, JJ Peterka is capable of having a 25 goal season. So that's a wash, right? So you really still haven't solved your offensive scoring depth dilemma unless and until you see the development of Fraser Minten, James Hagens, and even if what we're hearing is accurate and that Matt Poitras is going to be given an opportunity, it's not going to be handed to him, and it shouldn't be handed to any of them. It honestly shouldn't, right?
No.
But then that begs the same question from our conversation regarding the defensemen and the number of bodies, because this is a numbers game right now. Who's out?
Yeah.
Where do you make adjustments here? And look, you know how I feel about Elias Lindholm. I have not made it a secret. I want the organization to move on from this player. I don't believe that they can move on from him because the contract is a noose around their neck. But in my mind, this player is damaged goods. And I don't believe that it warrants having him in your number one center role. That's what you signed him as. That's what you might have been expecting from him. But it's no longer a small sample size that he can't do it. He can't give it to you.
Right.
So you've got a hole there already. Now, we've tried Pavel Zacha up there before, and that hasn't worked. Out for him.
No. And if we're looking at who is actually available in terms of, let's say, puck retrievers, because they're the ones who have to get the puck to either your finishers or your scorers. And obviously our elite creator, we have only one. So our depth on that is thin, at least right now. I think that they're certainly hoping that someone like Peterka, he could be a creator. I'm sure that they're hoping that a lot of their young guys that are coming in right now and who are basically going to be coming in will be able to start to fill those roles. But a lot of the retrievers are our bottom six guys. Crowley, Janot, Isama. The only one that I think that has the potential to continue to move up the lineup in that role is Kuznetsov. And he proved several times that he does have the ability to play in the top six, but with his youth and inexperience, he wasn't always there for terribly long. I think we've got someone like Hagens who could potentially be an elite creator, but he's unproven. I wouldn't even count anything that he did at the very end of the season, and I'm honestly still shocked that they burned his first year on 3 games.
3 games,
basically.
yeah.
This
And
is still the big issue.
I know. But I've said this about Sean Corrali in the past, and I'm going to say it again. He's just a Jag. Just a Jag. I understand they felt they needed someone familiar with the organization and a veteran guy and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But you can't continue this straddling of the fence with this organization. If you've got young guys down in Providence that you're saying to us and you're saying to yourselves, you're going to give them every opportunity, or they're going to be given the opportunity to make the opening day roster, and I'm referring to Matt Poitras, right? Then what are you going to do with guys like Corrali and Middlestat? Because those two guys, to me, are Jags. They were filling an opening. They were filling a void for you while You're figuring out how you're going to proceed with the future build of your organization. But can you honestly look me in the face and tell me that guys like that are part of your rebuild or your retool? The answer should be no. The answer should be no. The players that should be the focal point that are now Peterka, Minten, Hagens. You've made that commitment to Geekie. You're stuck with Lindholm. And then you've got to build around that.
Boston is unfortunately bottom 6 perfect. And they have everything that they need to have a great third line and a great fourth line. Multiple guys who can come in and out and serve on those lines and be effective. It's the embarrassment of riches in an area.
Right. And there shouldn't be
You don't want to have too many of them. And we do, because it's your top 2 lines that are the most responsible for scoring that have the most holes. Literally, the least number of jobs are covered in those 2 lines, because you have literally one person who can be a creator finisher, one person who can be transition finisher. So great. You might have 2 guys who can be finishers on that top line. Great. Because you can't just have one. Your opposition is going to cover that guy and smother him, aka Pasta. But you don't have anyone who can play that, get the puck to them. You don't have that retriever at that level. You don't have someone who can play the interior, who can keep the puck in the zone. And the number of people available for the second line, it's even worse, because you, in theory, only have one role filled on your second line. The 2-way matchup, which is supposed to be your centerman. There's no one who can really fill that role of creator, really. Maybe Zacha. I'm really hoping that the Pavel Zacha that we saw this last season isn't a fluke, and I'm really afraid that it is. I think he would be an ideal 2C. And the problem is, and it continues to be, the lack of a 1C.
Where is our 1C? Where is our 1C? This is the age-old question. Where is our 1C? Where is the help that David Pastrnak needs in order for him to be that 60-goal scorer? And I appreciate what he did last season. 100 points is nothing to sneeze at. 71 flippin' assists. Okay? But that shouldn't be his game. That shouldn't be his game.
No, because the role of a center is puck retrieval, down low, interior work. Think of the bumper spot right in front of the goalie. That was where Patrice Bergeron lived, and having that defensive complement. I think Zacha still should be the second line center. And then you could have Geekie as a finisher, but then who is going to be that creation transition piece? Are we going to see that job given to a kid, one of the kids?
Right. There's a possibility, right? And then you can temper your expectations on Elias Lindholm if you bump him down to 3rd C, but it still leaves a mark on Don Sweeney that this guy that you brought in as your potential number 1C, who is now, I don't even know what his salary is, but he's getting paid more than he should, is now going to be your 3rd C.
Yeah. Ideally, I would really like to see both Husnudinov and Minten, quote unquote, get promoted. Husnudinov has played in the league a little bit longer than Minten. I'd like to see him move up. I don't know if Minten is ready yet, because he's about to go into his sophomore year, which we all know oftentimes comes with a little bit of a slump. He has the potential, and like we talked about in our player profile earlier this year, he has the potential to take on a 2C role pretty early. And there are just so many unknowns, because we don't truly know what kind of a player Peterka is going to be with the players that we currently have. Can he produce in the way that he's been known to produce? how about these young kids like James Hagens? Is he going to be that secondary goal scorer that we need right now? I don't know. There are a lot of question marks with a lot of young players or new players that we just don't know how they're going to work within the system. The NHL at one point on their website posted some line predictions.
Oh,
and
yes,
some of them I think are freaking bonkers. The prediction for the first line is Peterka, Zacha, and Pastrnak. And I understand why they put Zacha there.
Because of the season he had last year, right?
But I've watched him long enough that I
Right,
can't,
I
don't know.
Zacha and Pasta don't seem to work well together. I don't know what it is. They don't.
Yeah.
And Pasta loved playing with the young kids. He said it himself.
To play with the kids.
He said it himself at one point during last season.
Yeah. And then if you're looking at the second line for the NHL writers to say it could be Husnudinov, Lindholm, and Geekie, I would rather see Lindholm be the third C and Minten take on that 2C role because he plays so well with Husnudinov. Why would you separate them? I think that could be a really fun line that could produce scoring that is necessary because Husnudinov is that puck retriever and you've got Minten, who is going to be a really great two-way defenseman. And then Geekie is an excellent finisher. I think that's who he is. I really do think that's who Morgan Geekie is. I don't think that his rise in the past 18 months has been out of the ordinary. And then to have on the third line, they put Minten and Hagens. I do think that Hagens, he should start on the third line. That's the developmental line. They got to give him a sense of what it's like to play. If he exceeds expectations, he will not be on that line for very long at all. But he has to do the work and show that he knows and understands now this game because it's very different than any game that he has ever played.
You're going to be potentially taking roles or veterans' roles will need to change on this team.
Yeah. The only line that I would argue probably doesn't need to be touched is the Janot Corrali-Kastelik line.
Okay, so then where does Matt Poitras fit in? Say Matt Poitras shines during training camp, right? During training camp, he's seizing the moment and taking the advantage of the opportunity that he is presented and earning himself a spot on the roster. Somebody has to come out.
I think the only center, because he normally plays center, right?
They've had him play wing before, though.
Right or left wing? I don't remember.
I don't remember.
Let me look real quick. I do have an answer to your question. He shoots right, so he's probably right wing.
I mean, they still haven't signed the kid, so.
No, I mean, that's the other thing.
Another problem. They still haven't signed him. So he's played center and right wing.
Knowing how things work in that if it were a true meritocracy, Lindholm's job would be very much so threatened. But we both know, you and I,
yes, it's likely not going to happen. Correct.
He's
correct. Because we would go after Sweeney with pitchforks. So he's like getting paid over $750 million. What are we doing here?
Corrali could be without a job. It's the same idea with Mason Lohrei.
And we're stuck with him until 2031.
At least with Lohrei, because of his age and his blatant mistakes, you can sit him for a little while, but you can't actually sit him for too long because of how much money you're paying him. So it's the same thing with Lindholm. Okay, maybe he's not producing. If he's not causing damage, he's got to be in the lineup because he's $7 million a year. You can't have someone like that sitting out for very long. So I think if Poitras really shines, he would have to be 10 times better, honestly, in that short period of time at the start in preseason or in camp than Fraser Minten. Minten would have to be really bad. And then possibly Corrali. Those are the two centers that I could see.
See, I don't think, I don't think Minten's going anywhere or should
unless
go
he
anywhere.
has a terrible sophomore slump and needs to be sat.
That's a different conversation. We're looking at this from the lens of last season. To me, the guys in this grouping that we're talking about right now, and I'm couching this as which are the guys that are part of the future and the rebuild. And to me, neither Middlestat nor Corrali fits in that bucket right now. What you do with them, I don't know. But you can't sit here, Dawn, and espouse about the opportunities that are going to be provided to the young guys, because you've got to provide those opportunities at some point in time. You can't keep saying that you're going to do it and not do it. So there are odd men out. And in my purview, those would be the two. I'm glad it's not me having to make that decision, but this is the bed that Don Sweeney has made for himself. Now he's going to have to lie in it and figure it out.
A real Sophie's choice over here, except
Right. Which will make, honestly, folks, if you ever want to pay attention to training camp or preseason, this would be the season to pay attention to training camp in terms of, is the organization following through what they said they were going to do? Or are they continuing to give us lip service because they still want to have a viable NHL team on the ice,
right,
that will put butts in the seats and that will give you I don't want to say the pretense of competing, but will draw you in because they're competing in the Eastern Conference.
Yep. The couple of wild card people who we haven't explicitly talked about because of a variety of reasons, but we saw for part of the season, Alex Steves. He also has the potential for a role in a middle six finisher job. But we also have Lucas Reichel, who only played 10 games with Boston last year. I think he came in via trade. He's another guy. He's quite a bit younger than everyone. I wonder if he's going to be able to crack the roster. I don't know.
That'll be interesting because if for some reason a Matt Poitras or Hagens or Minten don't show you the flash that you might be expecting from them, again, competition is good. We all know what happened one season where there was no competition at Bruins training camp, right? It turned into a shit show. It was an unmitigated shit show. The organization should not and likely will not let that happen again.
Right.
I still think that you have to make difficult decisions and say, we've got to cut the cord with some of these veterans that we brought in because we do need to see what the growing pains are or are not with some of these young players.
Yes.
And I know we said this during a prior podcast this summer, but as we were watching the Stanley Cup Finals and saw the Carolina Hurricanes and the Vegas Golden Knights going pretty much toe-to-toe, we all realized that we, as a Boston Bruins team and as a fan base, have still a long way to go. To be able to compete with the likes of teams such as that.
Yeah, exactly. Any final thoughts on what we're looking at going into this fall?
So I still think, maybe I hope, that there's still a hockey trade to be made by Don Sweeney to alleviate some of this redundancy that we have both with defensemen and with forwards and get ourselves something viable in return.
Yeah.
Short of that, I think Marco Sturm did a very good job last season as his first year. Players seemed to have responded to him. Management appears to be committed and allowing him to cook, so to speak. I do expect them to be somewhat competitive. We've got an excellent goaltender. We've got David Pastrnak. We do have some young talent that I think has a lot more up than down if they're given the opportunity to earn their spots, make their mistakes because they're going to make mistakes, and then see where it all lands. All you have to do in the NHL, is get into the playoffs. Everybody in the world knows that.
Yep. It's a new season when you get in the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's a whole different game. The field has become leveled. Until next week, make sure you like and subscribe for more content and be sure to leave a rating and review to help other Bruins fans find us. You can support the podcast by joining our Patreon or following us on our socials at Tape2Tape.mk and on Substack at Tape2Tape.mk.substack.com. Final thoughts.
Go Bruins.
Go Bees.